Don't let them rush you.
Why are they here?
Read it when you're alone.
What was that? No, not her.
It's just paperwork.
Before I sign anything, explain this.
The last time I saw my husband alive, he squeezed my hand so weakly I almost didn't feel it. And then a nurse slipped something into my palm like it was a secret I wasn't supposed to have. I didn't open it. Not when his daughter kept hovering over us. Not when the doctor said the words I wasn't ready to hear. Not even when I watched the machines go silent. It wasn't until hours later, alone in our bedroom, still wearing the same coat, that I unfolded the paper. And what I read made me realize my husband's death wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something I had never seen coming. If you've ever trusted someone you shouldn't have, or felt like something wasn't right but couldn't prove it, please like this video and subscribe. And tell me in the comments, would you have opened the notes sooner than I did? My name is Dorothy Thompson, and for nearly 20 years I believed I understood my place in my husband's life. I wasn't his first love. I wasn't the mother of his child. I came into his world long after the most important chapters had already been written. But Bill used to tell me something that made me feel like I still mattered. "You're the quiet part of my life," he'd say. "The part that finally feels like home." I held on to those words more than I probably should have. We met in Portland, Oregon at a charity fundraiser neither of us really wanted to attend. He was recently retired from running a mid-sized construction company, and I was volunteering because I didn't know what else to do with my evenings after my own quiet divorce. He had this way of listening, really listening, that made you feel like the rest of the room didn't exist. Back then, he still laughed easily. His shoulders were broader, his voice stronger. There was a steadiness to him that made me feel safe in a way I hadn't in years. But there was always someone else in the background. Lauren, his daughter. I remember the first time I met her. She was in her early 20s, then already sharp around the edges, already watching me like I was something temporary. She shook my hand politely, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "She's nice," she told Bill later that night. I overheard it from the kitchen, but don't expect me to play happy family. Bill had sighed the kind of sigh that carried years of exhaustion. "She's not asking you to." That was the beginning. For a long time, I told myself that Lauren just needed time. Losing her mother young had hardened her in ways I couldn't understand. I tried not to take it personally when she skipped holidays or barely spoke during family dinners. I kept setting an extra plate at Thanksgiving. I kept buying her thoughtful gifts for Christmas. I kept trying, and for years, nothing really changed. Then Bill got sick. It started with the coughing. At first, it was just something we laughed off, seasonal allergies, maybe a cold that wouldn't go away. But then came the fatigue, the weight loss, the long silences when he thought I wasn't looking. By the time we had answers, it felt like the ground had already shifted beneath us. Heart complications, lung cancer, words that don't just describe a condition, they redraw your entire future. That was when Lauren came back. At first, I was relieved. She started calling more often, showing up at the house, offering to help with appointments. She even hugged me once in the kitchen, her arms stiff but present, and said, "We'll get through this." For a moment, I believed her, but something about it felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, not at first. It was the way her questions drifted just slightly away from her father and toward everything else. "Did Dad ever update his will?" she asked one afternoon while I was making tea. I blinked, caught off guard. "I don't know. We haven't talked about that recently." She nodded slowly like she was filing that information away. He should. Things like that get messy if they're not clear. Another time, she stood in the hallway outside Bill's office, looking at the shelves of folders and binders. "There's a lot here," she said. "You ever think about simplifying things? Selling the house, maybe downsizing?" I laughed it off. This is Bill's home. He built half of it himself. I don't think he's going anywhere. She didn't laugh with me. "People don't always get a choice," she said quietly. After that, I started noticing more. Her husband, Eric Dawson, began coming along too. He worked in real estate, something he made sure to remind us of every time he stepped through the door. He had that polished, confident way of speaking that made everything sound reasonable even when it wasn't. "You've got a lot of equity tied up here," he said once casually, running his hand along the banister Bill had installed himself. "In this market, you'd be surprised what it could go for." Bill, sitting in his recliner, had just smiled weakly. "I'm not interested in selling my home." Eric raised his hands like he meant no harm. "Just saying, options are always good. Options." That word stayed with me. Because the more time passed, the more it felt like Lauren and Eric weren't just visiting out of concern. They were assessing, taking inventory, measuring things, and Bill saw it too. I could tell from the way his eyes followed them when they thought he was asleep, from the way his hand would tighten around mine whenever they brought up paperwork or finances or future planning. But he never confronted them. Not directly. I think part of him didn't want to believe his own daughter could be thinking that way. Or maybe he was just too tired to fight. So we carried on like everything was normal. Doctor visits, medication schedules, quiet dinners where Bill ate less and less. Nights where I lay awake listening to his breathing, counting each rise and fall like it might be the last. And through it all, Lauren kept getting closer. Too close. She started showing up unannounced, bringing documents just in case, offering to organize Bill's files. Once I walked into his office and found her going through a drawer I had never even opened myself. She didn't look embarrassed when I asked what she was doing. "Just trying to help," she said. "There's a lot here that needs attention." I didn't argue. I didn't want conflict, not with everything else we were dealing with, but something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was something quieter, a feeling that I was slowly being moved to the side of my own life, like decisions were starting to happen around me instead of with me. The week before Bill's last hospital visit, Lauren called and asked for copies of his insurance documents. "It'll make things easier later," she said. "Trust me." I hesitated. I think Bill should be the one to decide that. There was a pause on the line, then her voice softened, but not in a way that felt warm. "Dorothy? You need to start thinking realistically. Dad's not getting better." I swallowed hard. "I know that." "Then don't make this harder than it has to be." Harder for who I wanted to ask that, but I didn't. Instead, I hung up and sat in the quiet of our living room staring at the walls Bill had painted himself years ago. Every corner of that house held a piece of him. Every scratch, every nail, every memory. And suddenly, for the first time, I had the unsettling thought that someone else was already planning what to do with it all after he was gone. That night, Bill reached for my hand in the dark. "They've been asking you things, haven't they?" he said softly. I turned toward him. "It's nothing we can't handle." He was quiet for a moment. Then he squeezed my hand with what little strength he had left. "Just don't let anyone rush you, Dorothy." I didn't understand what he meant. Not fully, not yet. But those words stayed with me. Because a few days later, we would walk into that hospital for the last time. And everything I thought I understood would start to unravel. The morning of Bill's final hospital visit felt strangely ordinary. That was the part that haunted me the most afterward, the normalcy of it. The way the sunlight filtered through the kitchen window as I helped him into his coat, the way he insisted on buttoning it himself, even though his hands trembled so badly it took him 3 tries. "I've still got some pride left," he murmured, offering me a tired smile. I smiled back even as my chest tightened. "I know you do." The drive to the hospital was quiet. Bill stared out the window most of the time, his reflection faint against the glass. I kept my eyes on the road, but every so often I glanced over just to make sure he was still there, still breathing, still mine. When we pulled into the parking lot, he didn't move right away. "Dorothy," he said softly. I turned to him. "Yes, if they start talking fast, if they try to put papers in front of you." He paused, catching his breath. "Don't sign anything, not right away." I frowned slightly. "Bill, what are you talking about? Who would just promise me?" His voice was weaker now, but there was something urgent beneath it. I hesitated for only a second before nodding. I promise. He relaxed back into the seat as if that small assurance had taken the last of his strength. Inside, everything smelled like antiseptic and something colder, something final, the kind of place where time didn't pass the same way it did outside, where minutes stretched and collapsed without warning. We checked in, and within minutes a nurse led us to a room. Bill struggled onto the hospital bed, and I helped adjust his pillow, smoothing it under his head the way I had done 100 times at home. "You always make it better," he whispered. I swallowed hard. That's my job. But before I could say anything else, the door opened. Lauren walked in. She was dressed sharply as always. Tailored coat, perfectly styled hair, not a single detail out of place. Behind her was Eric carrying a leather folder tucked neatly under his arm. Dad Lauren said, her voice suddenly soft, almost tender. She moved to his side and leaned down to kiss his cheek. For a brief moment, I saw something real in her expression. Or maybe I just wanted to. "We came as soon as we could," she added, glancing at me briefly before turning her attention back to Bill. Eric nodded. "Good to see you, Bill. We'll get everything squared away." Something about the way he said that made my stomach tighten. Everything squared away. Bill didn't respond right away. His eyes flicked from Lauren to Eric, then to the folder in Eric's hand. "What's that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, nothing urgent," Lauren said quickly. "Just some documents. You know, in case we need to handle anything while you're here." "While you're here." The words hung in the air, heavier than they should have. I stepped closer to the bed. "What kind of documents?" Lauren smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just routine things, Dorothy. Medical authorizations, maybe some financial access, if needed. It's better to be prepared." Eric opened the folder slightly, just enough for me to catch a glimpse of neatly stacked papers. "It'll save time later," he added smoothly. I looked at Bill. His face had gone pale and his hand searched blindly for mine. I took it immediately, squeezing gently. "We don't need to deal with that right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Lauren's expression tightened for a fraction of a second before she smoothed it over again. "Of course," she said. "We're not rushing anything." But I could feel it. The pressure. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was subtle, woven into their tone, their posture, the way they positioned themselves in the room. Eric stood closer to the foot of the bed, like he was already part of the process. Lauren hovered just slightly too close to Bill's side, as if she were trying to intercept any decision before it reached me. A knock interrupted the tension. A doctor entered, followed by a nurse I hadn't seen before. "This is Dr. Patel," the nurse said gently. "He'll be going over today's evaluation." The doctor nodded, greeting each of us briefly before turning his full attention to Bill. He spoke in calm, measured tones, explaining things I only half understood, declining function-limited options, comfort-focused care. Words that sounded clinical but felt like a quiet countdown. I stayed by Bill's side, holding his hand, focusing on the rhythm of his breathing. Lauren asked a few questions, precise, controlled ones. Eric occasionally chimed in, always bringing the conversation back to logistics. And what kind of documentation would be required if decisions need to be made quickly, Eric asked at one point. Dr. Patel glanced at him, then at me. Typically, the legal spouse would be the primary decision-maker unless otherwise specified. There was a brief silence. I felt Bill's fingers tighten around mine. Lauren's smile didn't falter, but something behind her eyes shifted. "That's good to know," she said lightly. After the doctor finished, he excused himself, promising to return later with updates. The room grew quieter, heavier. Bill closed his eyes, clearly exhausted. "I think he needs rest," I said softly. Lauren nodded. "Of course." But she didn't leave. Instead, she leaned slightly toward Eric, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. Eric nodded and stepped out into the hallway with her. The moment the door closed behind them, Bill opened his eyes again. "They're moving too fast," he whispered. I leaned closer. "What do you mean they've been planning longer than you think?" My heart skipped. Planning what? Before he could answer, his breathing hitched, and a wave of weakness seemed to wash over him. His grip on my hand loosened. "Bill," I said, panic rising. "I'm okay," he murmured, though he clearly wasn't. A few minutes later, the nurse returned the same one who had come in with the doctor. She checked his vitals, adjusted the IV, and spoke to him in a calm, reassuring tone. Then she turned to me. "Would you like to step out for a moment?" she asked gently. "We need to run a quick check." I hesitated. "I'd rather stay." "It'll only take a minute," she said softly. Reluctantly, I nodded. I stepped into the hallway, the door closing quietly behind me. Lauren and Eric were standing a few feet away, speaking in low voices. They stopped when they saw me. "Everything okay?" Lauren asked. "I think so." I replied, though I wasn't sure. Eric glanced at his watch. "We should probably go over a few things while we're here, just to be efficient." My chest tightened again. Not now. Lauren exhaled slowly, like she was trying to be patient. "Dorothy, we're just trying to help." Before I could respond, the nurse stepped out of the room. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, looking directly at me. "Yes, could you come here for a moment?" I walked toward her, leaving Lauren and Eric behind. The nurse led me a few steps down the hallway, just far enough that we were out of earshot. Up close, I could see something in her expression, something that didn't match her calm tone earlier. Concern. She glanced briefly over her shoulder, then back at me. "Your husband is stable for now," she said quietly, "but I need you to listen carefully." My heart started pounding. "Okay." She reached for my hand, and then without another word, she slipped something small and folded into my palm. Her fingers closed around mine for just a second longer than necessary. "Open it when you're alone," she whispered. Before I could ask anything, before I could even react, she stepped back, her expression returning to professional neutrality. "Let's get you back to your husband," she said aloud. I stood there for a moment, frozen, the small piece of paper pressing into my skin like it was alive, and for the first time I felt something shift deep inside me. Not just fear, something sharper, something that told me whatever was happening around me, I was only just beginning to see it. I didn't open the note, not right away. Even as I followed the nurse, Emily, I would later learn, back into the room, I could feel the small, folded paper burning against my palm. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried something more than just ink and words, something dangerous. I slipped it into the pocket of my coat without thinking, my fingers trembling slightly as I did. When I stepped back inside, Bill looked worse. There was no other way to describe it. His skin had taken on that fragile, almost translucent quality, and his breathing came in shallow, uneven waves. The monitors beside him blinked and beeped in a steady rhythm that somehow made everything feel more fragile, not less. I rushed to his side. "I'm here," I whispered, taking his hand again. His eyes flickered open, finding mine. For a moment, everything else disappeared: the machines, the hospital, the tension in the room. Just us. But then the door opened again. Lauren and Eric returned. Lauren moved quickly to the other side of the bed, her voice soft but urgent. "Dad, the doctor said they might need to make decisions quickly. We should be prepared." Prepared. That word again. Eric stepped forward, already opening his leather folder. "We've got everything ready. Just some authorizations, standard procedure. It'll make things smoother for everyone." My heart began to pound harder. "Not now," I said more firmly this time. "He needs to rest." Lauren's jaw tightened. "Dorothy, this isn't about timing. This is about being responsible." "Responsible," I echoed, my voice sharper than I intended. "He's still alive." The room went quiet. Bill's fingers twitched weakly in mine. Eric cleared his throat, trying to smooth things over. "We're not saying he isn't. We're just trying to make sure nothing falls through the cracks. Hospitals move fast. Paperwork gets complicated." "Then it can wait," I said. Lauren took a slow breath, like she was trying very hard not to lose her patience. "You don't understand how these things work," she said quietly. I met her gaze. "Then explain it to me. Don't rush me." For a second, something flashed across her face. Frustration, maybe even anger, but it vanished just as quickly. "Fine," she said, "we'll wait." But I didn't believe her, not anymore. The tension in the room lingered, thick and suffocating. No one spoke for a while. The only sound was the steady beeping of the machines and Bill's uneven breathing. Eventually, Lauren stepped back. "We'll give you some space," she said, though her tone felt more strategic than kind. Come on, Eric. They left the room again, closing the door softly behind them. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything they had said. I sat down beside Bill, still holding his hand. You did good, he whispered faintly. I leaned closer. I don't know what's happening, Bill. He swallowed his throat, working with effort. They've been pushing me for weeks. My stomach dropped. Pushing you how? Papers, changes. Saying it's easier if I transfer things early. To them, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer directly, but his eyes said enough. I didn't sign, he added after a moment. But they don't believe that. A chill ran through me. They think they can get you to sign instead, I said slowly. Bill closed his eyes as if even acknowledging it took too much energy. Don't let them rush you, he repeated. Those words again. They felt different now. He wasn't just being cautious. He was warning me. A knock came at the door, softer this time. It opened just a crack, and Nurse Emily stepped inside again. Just checking on him, she said gently. She moved efficiently, adjusting the IV, checking the monitors, speaking to Bill in a low, reassuring voice. But every so often, her eyes flicked toward me. Not casually, intentionally, as if she were making sure I understood something without saying it out loud. When she finished, she turned to leave, but paused near me. Mrs. Thompson, she said quietly, if you need anything. I'm on this floor until the end of my shift. There was something in her tone, something deliberate. I nodded, thank you. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod in return before leaving the room. The moment the door closed, I felt my pulse quicken again. The note. I could still feel it in my coat pocket. For a moment I considered taking it out, right there, unfolding it, reading whatever secret it held. But something stopped me. Instinct. Or maybe fear. Because if the situation was already this fragile, if Bill was already this weak, what if whatever was written on that paper changed everything? What if I wasn't ready to know? I looked at Bill. His breathing had grown even shallower, his chest rising and falling in small, uneven motions. I'm right here, I whispered again, though I wasn't sure if he could hear me. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time didn't feel real anymore. At some point, Lauren and Eric returned again, quieter this time. They didn't bring the folder back out, but I could see it tucked under Eric's arm like it was waiting, always waiting. Lauren stood at the foot of the bed watching her father. For a brief moment, her expression softened, and I wondered, truly wondered, if there was still a part of her that was just a daughter, losing her father, or if even that had been buried under everything else. Dad, she said gently, we're here. Bill didn't respond. His eyes remained closed. The machines continued their steady rhythm, and suddenly, everything shifted. A nurse rushed in Emily again, followed by another staff member. Their movements were quick, precise, urgent. Sir, can you hear me? Emily said, her voice firm but controlled. My heart leapt into my throat. What's happening? I asked, standing up so quickly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. His oxygen levels are dropping, the other nurse said. Lauren stepped back, her hand flying to her mouth. Eric moved toward the door, calling for a doctor. The room filled with movement. Voices, commands, machines beeping faster. I stood frozen for a second, watching it all unfold like something happening to someone else. Then I grabbed Bill's hand again. I'm here, I said, my voice breaking. I'm right here. His fingers didn't tighten this time, didn't respond. And in that moment, I forgot everything else. The tension, the documents, the note. All of it disappeared under one overwhelming truth. I was losing him. A doctor rushed in. Instructions were given. More machines, more urgency. I don't remember all of it clearly. Only fragments. Lauren crying, Eric pacing, Emily's voice steady and calm even in the chaos. And then silence. Not complete silence. The machines were still there. The people were still there. But something had changed. Something final. The doctor turned to me, his expression gentle but heavy. I'm so sorry, he said. The words landed, but they didn't fully sink in. Not right away. Because in that moment, I wasn't thinking about anything except the empty space where Bill's presence had been just seconds before. Everything else, the warning, the tension, the note in my pocket, would have to wait. but not for long, because whatever that nurse had given me was about to become the most important thing in my life. Grief doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in layers. The first was silence. Not the kind you hear in a quiet room, but the kind that presses against your chest until breathing feels like work. After the doctor said those words, I'm so sorry everything around me blurred into something distant and unreal. I remember someone guiding me into a chair. I remember Lauren crying, loudly, too loudly. Her sobs filled the room in sharp, uneven bursts, the kind that demanded attention. She clutched the edge of the bed, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. Dad, no, she cried. If I hadn't been standing right there, if I hadn't just watched Bill take his last breath, I might have believed it was pure heartbreak. But something about it didn't feel right. Maybe it was the way her eyes flicked up between sobs, checking who was watching. Maybe it was the way Eric stood behind her, not touching her, not comforting her, just observing. Or maybe it was because even in that moment, I could feel something shifting beneath the surface, something colder than grief. I stood there, still holding Bill's hand. It was already losing warmth. I didn't want to let go. Not yet. Mrs. Thompson. A voice said gently beside me. I turned slightly. It was Nurse Emily. Her expression was soft, but her eyes were searching. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. I nodded, though the motion felt distant, disconnected from my own body. Take your time, she added. Time. I wasn't sure what that meant anymore. Eventually, someone, maybe a nurse, maybe a staff member, gently encouraged me to step away so they could prepare Bill. I don't remember agreeing, but suddenly I was no longer beside him. I was standing near the wall, watching. Lauren had stopped crying. Just like that. The shift was so abrupt it startled me. She wiped her face, carefully adjusting her makeup with quick, practiced movements. Eric stepped closer to her, now murmuring something low that I couldn't hear. Then Lauren turned toward me. Dorothy, she said softly, her voice controlled again. We need to talk. The words felt jarring, almost inappropriate in the stillness of that room. Not now, I said, my voice hoarse. She took a step closer. I know this is hard, she said, though her tone lacked warmth, but there are things that need to be handled immediately. The hospital, the paperwork, the estate. My husband just died. I interrupted. The room went still again. For a brief second, something like irritation flashed across her face. I understand that she said, though she clearly didn't, but delaying things will only make everything more complicated. Eric stepped in, his voice smooth and measured. She's right, Dorothy. There are time-sensitive matters. Medical bills, legal documentation. If we don't act quickly, it could create unnecessary issues later. Unnecessary issues. I stared at him, then at her. And for the first time, the grief in my chest made room for something else. Something sharper. You're already thinking about that, I asked quietly. Lauren's expression hardened just slightly. I'm thinking about being responsible, she replied. Someone has to. I am his wife, I said, and I'm his daughter, she shot back. The words hung between us, heavy, final. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Lauren exhaled as if trying to regain control of the situation. Look, she said, her tone shifting back to something more measured. We're not trying to fight. We just need to make sure everything is handled properly. Dad wouldn't want things to get messy. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how wrong it felt. Then we'll handle it, I said. Later. Eric glanced at Lauren, then back at me. Later might be too late, he said carefully. There are forms that need to be signed while we're still here. Authorizations, access permissions. It's standard procedure. That word again, standard. As if everything happening was normal. As if this moment, this loss could be reduced to paperwork and signatures. I felt something shift inside me again. A memory. Bill's voice in the car. If they start talking fast, if they try to put papers in front of you, don't sign anything. My hand instinctively brushed against my coat pocket. The note, still there, unopened. A sudden chill ran through me. No, I said firmly. Lauren blinked. No, I'm not signing anything today. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Dorothy, you're not thinking clearly right now. I'm thinking clearly enough, I replied. Eric stepped forward, slightly lowering his voice. We're not asking you to make permanent decisions, just temporary access. It's practical. Practical for who I asked. Neither of them answered immediately. That was answer enough. The tension in the room thickened again, wrapping around us like something alive. Finally, Lauren straightened her posture, smoothing her coat as if resetting herself. Fine, she said coolly. We won't push you. But her eyes told a different story. This wasn't over, not even close. We'll come by the house tomorrow, she added. You'll be more settled by then. Settled. The word felt wrong, as if grief had a schedule, as if I could just file it away and move on to the next task. I'll call you, I said instead. Lauren didn't respond right away. She studied me for a moment, really studied me as if trying to decide something. Then she nodded once. All right. Eric gave me a polite, practiced smile. Get some rest, he said. You're going to need it. They left shortly after that. Just like that. No lingering, no quiet moment beside Bill, no final goodbye that I could see. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and suddenly the room felt emptier than it had before. Not just because Bill was gone, but because something else had been revealed, something I couldn't ignore anymore. I stood there for a long time. Eventually, Nurse Emily returned. She approached me carefully, as if she didn't want to startle me. They've left, she asked quietly. I nodded. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. I'm glad she said under her breath. That caught my attention. You are, I asked. She hesitated, just for a second. Then she gave a small, careful smile. You should go home and rest. It wasn't an answer. Not really, but it was enough to confirm something I was beginning to suspect. She knew more. Much more. I swallowed, my hand tightening around the edge of my coat pocket. The note was still there, waiting. Suddenly I felt an overwhelming urge to be alone, to get out of that room, that hospital, that suffocating atmosphere where everything felt like it was closing in. I think I will, I said softly. Emily nodded. If you need anything, she began, then paused. Her eyes met mine again, meaningfully. You have my number, she finished. I did. And somehow that felt important. I took one last look at Bill. At the man who had been my quiet place for 20 years. At the man who had warned me again and again not to let anyone rush me. I'm going to figure this out, I whispered. Then I turned and walked out of the room. Out of the hospital. Out into the cold evening air. The world outside hadn't changed. Cars still passed. People still moved. Life continued indifferent to what had just ended. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Then slowly I reached into my coat pocket. My fingers brushed against the folded paper. For a second I hesitated, because once I opened it, there would be no going back. I didn't open the note in the parking lot. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. Standing there under the cold Oregon sky with the hospital lights glowing behind me and my entire life feeling like it had just been ripped in half. I almost unfolded it right then and there, but something stopped me. Not fear, something quieter, something instinctive. Whatever was written on that paper, it deserved more than a moment between passing cars and strangers walking by. It felt like something that would change everything. So I drove home. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside. It was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet Bill used to love, but the kind that echoed. The kind that reminded you with every step that someone was missing. His coat was still hanging by the door. His mug still sat in the sink from that morning. Everything was exactly where it had been when we left, except he wasn't here anymore. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting the silence settle around me like a weight. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at nothing. Feeling everything all at once, grief, exhaustion, confusion, and something else. That same sharp, quiet feeling that had been building all day. Finally, I pushed myself forward, one step, then another, until I reached the living room. I didn't turn on the lights. The fading daylight was enough. I sat down slowly on the couch, my coat still wrapped around me, my hands resting in my lap. And then I reached into my pocket. The paper was still there, small, folded, unassuming, but the moment my fingers closed around it, my pulse quickened. This was it. Whatever Nurse Emily had risked to give me, whatever Bill had been trying to warn me about, it was all in this. I unfolded it carefully, my hands trembling more than I wanted them to. The paper was creased, twice the edges, slightly worn, like it had been folded in a hurry. For a brief moment I hesitated. Just 1 second. Because I knew deep down that once I read it, there would be no pretending anymore. No ignoring what I had felt all day. No going back to the version of reality where everything was just grief and unfortunate timing. I took a breath, and I opened it. There was only one sentence, written in neat, deliberate handwriting. Do not sign anything Lauren gives you. Ask about the blue envelope. I stared at the words. Read them once, twice, 3 times. Each time they felt heavier, colder, more real. My heart began to pound in my chest, loud enough that I could hear it in my ears. Lauren, not someone. Not be careful. Not take your time. Lauren. The name sat there undeniable. Direct, intentional. This wasn't a vague warning. This was specific, personal, targeted. A chill ran down my spine. I pressed the paper flat against my knee, my fingers gripping the edges tightly as if it might somehow disappear if I let go. Do not sign anything Lauren gives you. Bill's voice echoed in my mind. Don't let them rush you. If they try to put papers in front of you... My stomach twisted. He knew. Or at least, he suspected. And Nurse Emily. She knew enough to risk giving me this, which meant whatever was happening wasn't just in my head. It was real. Very real. I forced myself to look at the second part again. Ask about the blue envelope, the blue envelope. I whispered the words under my breath, like saying them out loud might make them clearer. But they didn't. They only made things more confusing. What blue envelope? Bill had never mentioned anything like that to me. Or had he? I closed my eyes, searching my memory. Small details, half-finished conversations, moments I might have brushed off before. There were so many things in the past few weeks that I hadn't questioned things I had accepted because I was too focused on taking care of him. Too focused on not losing him. Had I missed something? Had he tried to tell me? A sudden thought struck me. His office. I opened my eyes quickly, my breath catching. Bill's office had always been his space. Even after he retired, he kept everything organized in his own way. Folders, files, old documents, things he said he might need someday. I hadn't touched much of it. Not really. Lauren had. The memory hit me sharply, her standing in the doorway, looking at the shelves, opening drawers, just trying to help. My pulse spiked. What if she had been looking for something? What if she had already found it? I stood up too quickly, the room tilting slightly around me. I grabbed the edge of the couch to steady myself, taking a slow breath. Think. Don't panic. If Bill had left something for me, something important enough to warn me about, he wouldn't have made it easy for anyone else to find. He knew Lauren better than I did. That thought brought a strange kind of clarity. I looked down at the note again. The handwriting. It wasn't Bill's. That much I was sure of. Which meant Emily had written it. Based on something he told her, or something she had overheard. Either way, it meant Bill had trusted her. Enough to leave a message through her. My throat tightened. He'd been trying to protect me. Even at the end. Even when he was weak, when he could barely speak, he was still thinking about me. Still trying to make sure I wouldn't be blindsided. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them away quickly. Not now. I could grieve later. Right now, I needed to understand. I folded the note carefully and held it in my hand, feeling the weight of it again. It wasn't just paper. It was a warning, a lifeline, a piece of something Bill had set in motion before he was gone. And suddenly, everything that had felt confusing before started to take shape. Lauren's urgency, Eric's documents, the pressure to sign, the timing, it all pointed in one direction. They weren't just trying to help, they were trying to move quickly. Before I had time to think, before I had time to question, before I had time to find this, the blue envelope. My grip tightened. No, I whispered into the empty room. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not anymore. I walked slowly toward the hallway, my heart still racing, but my steps more deliberate now. Bill's office door stood slightly ajar, just like he always left it. For a moment I paused at the threshold, because stepping inside felt like crossing into something new, something I hadn't been ready to face before. But now, I didn't have a choice. I pushed the door open. The room smelled faintly of wood and paper, the familiar scent wrapping around me like a memory. Everything looked the same, too the same, but now I wasn't looking at it as his wife. I was looking at it as someone searching for the truth. And somewhere in this room, I knew it was waiting for me. I didn't find the blue envelope that night. What I found instead was something almost as important, proof that I had been right not to trust them. Bill's office hadn't been disturbed in any obvious way. The shelves were still lined with binders, the desk neatly arranged, the drawers closed. If Lauren had gone through it, she had done it carefully, too carefully. But there were small things, tiny shifts, a pen placed slightly out of alignment, a file not pushed all the way back, the kind of details you wouldn't notice unless you had lived in that space for years, unless you knew what normal looked like. I searched for hours, drawers, cabinets, boxes tucked into corners. I checked places Bill had never used, just in case he had decided to hide something somewhere unexpected. Nothing. No blue envelope, no obvious clue. By the time I finally stopped, the sky outside had gone completely dark. My body ached. My eyes burned and grief pressed heavily against the edges of my focus. But one thing had changed. I wasn't confused anymore. I was certain. Whatever Bill had left for me, Lauren wanted it too, and she hadn't found it yet. That thought stayed with me as I finally went to bed, though I barely slept. Every sound felt louder, every shadow felt sharper, and somewhere in the back of my mind, the note repeated itself over and over again. Do not sign anything Lauren gives you. The next morning I was in the kitchen when I heard the knock. 3 sharp, deliberate taps, too early, too certain. I didn't need to check who it was. I already knew. I took a breath, steadying myself before walking to the door. When I opened it, Lauren stood there in a tailored coat, her expression composed and unreadable. Eric stood just behind her, holding the same leather folder from the hospital. Of course he was. "Good morning, Dorothy," Lauren said smoothly. I didn't return the greeting. "It's early," I said instead. Lauren gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "We didn't want to wait. There are a few things we really need to take care of today." Of course there were. I stepped aside, slowly letting them in. They walked in like they belonged there. That was the first thing that struck me. Lauren moved through the living room without hesitation, her eyes scanning the space in a way that felt less like familiarity and more like evaluation. Eric followed, already placing the folder on the dining table as if this were a scheduled meeting. "This won't take long," he said. I stayed standing. I didn't agree to anything. Lauren turned to me, her expression tightening just slightly. "Dorothy, we're not here to argue. We're here to help you." "I don't need help," I said. "Yes, you do," she replied calmly. "You're grieving. You're overwhelmed. This is exactly when mistakes happen." Mistakes. The word landed heavily. Eric opened the folder, sliding a stack of papers out and arranging them neatly on the table. "These are standard documents," he explained. "Temporary financial access authorization to handle pending expenses and a preliminary estate management agreement." I didn't move closer. "Why would I need that?" I asked. "So, we can take care of things efficiently," he said. "Medical bills, property maintenance, any outstanding obligations your husband left behind." "My husband didn't leave things unfinished," I said quietly. Lauren stepped forward, her tone softening, but only on the surface. "No one's saying he did," she said, "but things change when someone passes. There are processes, timelines." "And you're in a hurry," I interrupted. Silence. For just a second, then Lauren exhaled slowly. "We're trying to prevent problems," she said. "Or create an opportunity," I asked. That hit something. I saw it in her eyes, a flicker, gone almost immediately, but not fast enough. Eric cleared his throat, stepping in before she could respond. "Let's not make this adversarial," he said. "That's not productive." "I agree," I said. "So explain this to me clearly." I walked to the table, but I didn't sit. I looked down at the documents. Lines of text, legal language, signatures required. I scanned quickly, my eyes catching key phrases. Voluntary transfer of management authority, temporary relinquishment of direct control, property disposition review. My stomach tightened. "This isn't temporary," I said, looking up. Eric smiled politely. "It's structured that way for efficiency. It can always be reversed later." "After everything is already done," I asked. Lauren's patience began to crack. "Dorothy?" She said, her voice sharper now. "You don't understand how complicated this is." "No," I said, "I understand exactly what this is." The room went still. I reached out and lifted one of the pages. "This says I give you the right to manage the house." "It's just for now," Lauren insisted. And this one, I flipped another page. "Access to accounts to handle expenses." And this, I held up a third. "Agreement to review property sale options." Neither of them answered immediately. That silence told me everything. "You're not just helping," I said quietly. "You're positioning yourselves." Lauren's composure finally slipped. "That's not fair," she snapped. "This is my father's estate. I have every right to be involved." "Involved isn't the same as in control," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "There it is," I said softly. "What that word again, harder?" I stepped closer, meeting her gaze fully. "You've said that more than once." She didn't respond. "Let me ask you something," I continued. "If this is all so normal, so standard," I paused. "Why are you in such a rush?" For the first time, Lauren didn't have an immediate answer. Eric stepped in again, his tone smooth but firmer now. "Because delays create risk," he said, for who I asked. Silence again. The air between us felt charged now, like something was about to snap. I could feel my heart pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "I'm not signing anything," I said. Lauren stared at me. Longer this time, as if trying to decide whether to push harder or change tactics. Finally, she leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. "Fine," she said coolly. "Don't sign today." I didn't relax, because I knew this wasn't over. "But we're not going to keep going in circles," she continued. "You can't avoid this forever." "I'm not avoiding anything," I said. "I'm taking my time." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "That's a mistake." Or maybe I replied quietly, "It's the first smart thing I've done." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Lauren reached out and slowly closed the folder. The sound echoed in the silence. "We'll come back," she said. "Not if, when." Eric gave me one last measured look, as if reassessing me completely. Then they turned and walked toward the door. Lauren paused just before stepping out. "You don't know everything, Dorothy," she said without turning around. I watched her carefully. "No," I said, "but I'm starting to." She didn't respond. The door closed behind them. And for the first time since Bill died, I felt something shift. Not fear, not confusion, something stronger. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was paying attention, and somewhere in this house, the truth they were so desperate to get to was still waiting. I didn't move for a long time after the door closed. The silence in the house felt different now. Before it had been heavy with grief, slow, suffocating, endless. Now, it was sharp, alert, like the air right before a storm. I stood there in the middle of the living room, staring at the door Lauren and Eric had just walked through, replaying every word, every look, every pause. They weren't guessing. They weren't unsure. They expected me to sign. That meant one thing. They believed completely that whatever stood between them and everything Bill had left behind could be handled quickly, quietly, if I let them. My hand tightened into a fist. "No," I whispered. "Not anymore." I turned slowly and walked back to the dining table where Eric had spread out the documents. They had taken the main folder with them, but a single page had been left behind either by accident or because they hadn't thought it mattered. I picked it up. It was a duplicate copy of one of the authorization forms. Even without the rest of the stack, it was enough to confirm what I already suspected. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't harmless. This was a transfer of control, legal, structured, deliberate. And if I had signed it yesterday at the hospital when I was exhausted, when I could barely think, I would have handed them everything. My chest tightened at the thought. How close I'd come. How easily it could have happened. Bill had known. That realization settled into me slowly like something heavy finding its place. He had known they would try. He had known I might not see it in time, and he had still found a way to warn me. Through a nurse. Through a stranger. I closed my eyes briefly, steadying myself. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the note again. The handwriting was still as clear and deliberate as it had been the night before. Do not sign anything Lauren gives you. Ask about the blue envelope. The blue envelope. I said it out loud this time. Blue envelope. The words echoed softly in the empty house. I had searched his office. Everything that seemed obvious. Everything that felt logical. And I had found nothing, which meant one of two things. Either it wasn't there, or it wasn't where I expected it to be. A thought flickered through my mind. Not his office. Something else. Something more personal. But before I could follow that thread any further, my attention shifted back to the note. To the one person who had made it possible. Nurse Emily Carter. I walked quickly to the kitchen counter where I had set my purse earlier. My hands moved with a kind of urgency, now pulling it open, searching for my phone. When I found it, I hesitated for just a second, because calling her would make this real. More real than it already was. But I didn't have a choice. I needed answers. I scrolled through my recent calls until I found the number she had written on the back of the note. My thumb hovered over it. Then I pressed call. It rang twice. 3 times. On the 4th ring, she answered. Hello. Her voice was calm, professional, but there was something else beneath it. Recognition. This is Dorothy Thompson? I said, my voice quieter than I expected. You gave me a note yesterday. There was a brief pause. Not confusion, not surprise, just a shift. I was hoping you would call, she said. Something in my chest tightened. You knew I would, I asked. I wasn't sure she replied carefully, but I hoped you'd read it before signing anything. My grip on the phone tightened. They came to my house this morning, I said, with documents. Another pause, longer this time. What kind of documents, she asked. Authorizations, financial control, property management. It looked official. I could almost hear her exhale on the other end. I thought so, she murmured. My heart skipped. You thought so, I repeated. Emily, what's going on? Why did you give me that note? Silence. Not the empty kind. The kind where someone is deciding how much to say. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. Your husband spoke to me, she said. My breath caught. When? The night before yesterday. He was more alert than usual. The medication had been adjusted, and for a few hours, he was very clear. I sank slowly into a chair, my legs suddenly unsteady. What did he say? He asked if there was a way to make sure you wouldn't be pressured into signing anything she said. My throat tightened. He knew, I whispered. Yes, she said simply. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped them away quickly, forcing myself to stay focused. What else, I asked. Emily hesitated again. He didn't go into full detail, she said, but he mentioned his daughter and her husband. He said they had been bringing him documents, trying to convince him to make changes. That's what he told me, I said. But he said he didn't sign. He didn't, Emily confirmed. He was very clear about that. Relief washed through me, but it didn't last long. Then why the warning, I asked. If he didn't sign anything, what were they trying to get from me? Another pause. He said something else, Emily added slowly. My heart began to race again. What he said, she continued carefully. If they can't get it from me, they'll try to get it from her. A cold wave moved through me. They'll try to get it from her, from me. That's why you wrote the note, I said. Yes. And the blue envelope, I asked quickly. What is it? This time the silence stretched longer. I don't know exactly, Emily admitted. He didn't explain it, but he mentioned it twice. Twice? Yes. Once when he was asking about you, and once when he asked if I could write something down for him. My pulse spiked. Write something down. He was too weak to write clearly himself, she said, so I helped him. Just a short message, but when I asked him what else I should include, he said, "Tell her about the blue envelope." My grip on the phone tightened so much it hurt. He wanted me to find it, I whispered. Yes, Emily said, very much. I closed my eyes again, trying to piece everything together. If Bill had gone through the trouble of warning me, if he had involved someone outside the family, if he had left something hidden, then whatever was in that blue envelope was important, critical. Emily, I said slowly, do you think they know about it? Another pause. Then, no, she said. If they did, they wouldn't be trying so hard to get you to sign. That made sense, too much sense, which meant I still had time, but not much. They're going to come back, I said. I know, she replied. And next time, they'll push harder. Yes, she said quietly. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Then I need to find it before they do. There was a softness in her voice when she answered. I think your husband believed you would. That hit me harder than I expected. Not fear, not pressure, something else. Trust. He had trusted me, even at the end, even when everything was falling apart. I won't let him down, I said. I know you won't, Emily replied. The call ended shortly after that. I sat there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand, the note resting on the table in front of me. The house was quiet again, but not empty, not anymore, because now I knew. This wasn't just about grief, or paperwork, or family conflict. This was something else, something hidden, something Bill had tried to protect, and somewhere in this house, the truth was still waiting. I stood up slowly. My eyes drifted toward the hallway, toward the bedroom, toward the places I hadn't searched yet. Blue envelope, I whispered again. This time the words didn't feel confusing. They felt like a direction, and I was finally ready to follow it. I didn't go back to Bill's office, not yet. If the blue envelope had been there, I would have found it the night before. And if Lauren had been searching as carefully as I now believed she had, then anything obvious would already be gone. No, if Bill wanted me to find something, he wouldn't leave it in the most predictable place. I stood in the hallway, my eyes slowly moving from one door to the next, the living room, the office, the guest room, then the bedroom. A quiet, almost forgotten instinct nudged me forward. Our bedroom had always been different from the rest of the house, less organized, less deliberate. It was where Bill let his guard down, where he didn't worry about perfect order or carefully labeled folders. If there was anywhere he might have hidden something, it would be there. I stepped inside slowly. The bed was still unmade from the night before. His side of it untouched, the pillow slightly indented where his head had rested the last time he slept here. My chest tightened. For a moment, I almost turned back, because searching this room felt wrong. Too soon, too invasive. But then the memory of Lauren standing in his office flashed through my mind, opening drawers, going through things that weren't hers, and just like that, the hesitation faded. If she could do that, then I could do this. I moved toward the dresser first. Top drawer, clothes folded the way I had always kept them. Nothing unusual. Second drawer, socks, undershirts, the faint smell of his cologne still lingering. I paused for a second, pressing my hand lightly against the fabric. I'm sorry, I whispered. Then I kept going. Third drawer, more of the same. Nothing. I closed it slowly, my mind already moving ahead. Think like him, not like me. Bill wasn't careless, he was deliberate. If he wanted something hidden, it wouldn't be somewhere easy to stumble upon. It would be somewhere only he or someone who really knew him would think to look. My gaze shifted toward the nightstand. I crossed the room and pulled open the drawer. Inside were the usual things. A book he had been reading, his reading glasses, a small notepad. Nothing unusual. I picked up the book, flipping through it absent-mindedly, half expecting something to fall out. Nothing did. I set it back down, my frustration starting to build. "Where would you put it?" I muttered under my breath. I closed my eyes, trying to picture him. Not sick, not weak, but the man he had been before all of this. Organized, careful, private. A memory surfaced, small, seemingly insignificant, but now it felt like it mattered. The watch. Bill's old watch box. He had kept it tucked away for years, even after he stopped wearing most of them. He used to joke that it was the only place in the house no one ever thought to look. "No one cares about old watches," he had said once with a quiet smile. My eyes snapped open. I turned quickly toward the closet. It took me only a second to find it. A small wooden box pushed toward the back of the top shelf, partially hidden behind a stack of folded blankets. My heart started to race again as I reached up and pulled it down. The box felt heavier than I remembered. Not much, but enough. I carried it to the bed and sat down, placing it carefully in front of me. For a moment, I just stared at it, because something inside me already knew this was it, or at least, this was the next step. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside, the watches were still there, neatly arranged, untouched. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place, but then I noticed it. A small piece of tape on the inside edge of the box, barely visible, carefully placed. My breath caught. I leaned closer, my fingers moving carefully as I peeled it back. And there, tucked flat against the wood, was a tiny key. So small I might have missed it entirely if I hadn't been looking for something. My pulse surged. This wasn't random, this wasn't accidental. This was intentional. Bill had hidden it here. Not in the office, not in a safe, but in a place only someone who truly knew his habits would think to check. My hands trembled slightly as I held the key up to the light. It was smooth, metallic, unmarked, but I knew what it was. Or at least, what it could be. A safety deposit box. The thought came instantly, and once it did, everything else began to fall into place. The blue envelope, the warning, the urgency. Bill hadn't just hidden something. He had secured it. Somewhere Lauren couldn't reach. Somewhere Eric couldn't manipulate. Somewhere only I could access. A bank. Of course. My mind raced through possibilities. Which bank? We had accounts in a few places over the years, but Bill had always preferred one in particular, an old local branch he trusted long before I ever came into his life. He used to say, "Some places don't need to change to stay reliable." At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Now, it felt like a clue. I stood up, the key still clutched tightly in my hand. Everything inside me was moving faster now. The grief, the fear, the confusion. They were still there, but something else had taken their place at the center. Purpose, clarity. I grabbed my purse from the dresser, slipping the key carefully into the inner pocket. My fingers brushed against the folded note again as I did, and for a moment I paused. "Do not sign anything Lauren gives you." "I won't," I whispered. Then I headed for the door. I didn't know exactly what I would find. I didn't know how much time I had before Lauren and Eric came back pushing harder, asking more questions, trying new tactics. But I knew this, whatever Bill had left for me, was no longer hidden. It was waiting, and I was finally on my way to it. As I stepped out of the house and into the daylight, the key pressed against my palm like a promise, or maybe a warning. Either way, everything was about to change. The bank looked exactly the same as it always had. That was the first thing I noticed as I pulled into the parking lot, how ordinary everything seemed. The same brick exterior, the same small American flag by the entrance, the same quiet, almost sleepy atmosphere that had once made Bill trust it so much. Reliable, he used to say. Standing there now, the key pressed tightly in my palm, I finally understood what he meant. I stepped inside. The air was cool, faintly scented with paper and polish. A teller greeted me with a polite smile, the kind that comes from years of routine. "Good morning. How can I help you today?" My voice felt steadier than I expected. I need access to a safety deposit box, I said. She nodded. Of course. Do you have identification? I handed over my driver's license, my fingers only slightly unsteady. She typed something into her computer, her expression shifting as she read. Mrs. Thompson, she asked. Yes. Her tone softened just a fraction. I'm very sorry for your loss. The words caught me off guard. No. She gave a small, respectful nod. Your husband made arrangements here not long ago. He updated the access authorization. My heart skipped. He did, yes. He listed you as the primary and sole authorized individual. Sole. Not Lauren, not anyone else. Just me. A strange mix of relief and sadness washed over me. Even here. Even in this quiet, unassuming place, Bill had been thinking ahead. Protecting me. Please follow me, the teller said gently. She led me through a secured door and down a narrow hallway to the vault. The heavy door opened with a low mechanical hum, revealing rows of metal boxes stacked neatly into the walls. The air inside felt different. Still. Almost sacred. She guided me to one of the boxes, checking the number against a list before stepping back. I'll leave you here, she said. Take your time. She handed me a small tray and a key, then left, closing the vault door softly behind her. And suddenly, I was alone. Alone with whatever Bill had left for me. My hands trembled as I stepped closer. I inserted the small key I'd found into the lock. It fit perfectly. For a brief second, I froze, because this was it. Everything, the warning, the tension, the fear, it all led to this moment. I took a breath. Then I turned the key. The lock clicked open. I pulled the box out, slowly placing it on the tray in front of me. It wasn't large, but it felt heavy, deliberate. I lifted the lid, and there it was. A blue envelope. My breath caught in my throat. It was exactly as the note had described, plain, unmarked, but unmistakable. The color stood out against the dull metal of the box, like something waiting to be seen, waiting for me. But it wasn't the only thing inside. There was also a small USB drive and a folded stack of papers neatly clipped together. My heart pounded as I reached for the envelope first. The paper felt smooth under my fingers, the edges crisp. For a moment, I just held it, because I already knew this would change everything. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. Bill's handwriting. I knew it instantly, stronger than it had been at the hospital, but still slightly uneven, like it had taken effort. My vision blurred as I began to read. Dorothy. If you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to explain everything the way I wanted to. My throat tightened. I'm sorry for that. I should have handled this sooner. I should have protected you sooner. But I kept hoping I was wrong. I closed my eyes for a second, steadying myself. He had known, or at least, he had suspected enough to prepare for it. I kept reading. Lauren and Eric have been pressuring me for months. They've brought me documents more than once. They say it's about simplifying things, making it easier later, but what they're really asking for is control. My grip on the letter tightened. They want access to everything. The house, the accounts, the business assets I still have tied up, and they want it before I'm gone. A cold wave ran through me. Before I'm gone, not after, before. I refuse to sign anything every time, but I don't think they believe that's the end of it. I swallowed hard. Of course they didn't, because they had already moved on to me. If they can't get it from me, they'll try to get it from you. Emily's words echoed in my mind. He said the same thing. My hands began to shake slightly as I turned the page. That's why I made changes. Quietly. My pulse spiked. Changes. This was it. I updated my will. Everything that matters, the house, the remaining assets, the control of what's left of the company, it all goes to you. I froze. Everything. Not shared, not divided, mine. Tears filled my eyes, but I forced myself to keep reading. Lauren will receive something, but only under strict conditions. Conditions I don't believe she'll accept. A small, bitter understanding settled in. He had known her that well. I've also included evidence of what they've been doing. My gaze shifted to the USB drive sitting beside the envelope. My heart pounded louder. Evidence. You'll find recordings, copies of documents they brought me, and notes from conversations I had when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The room felt smaller, closer, more intense. This wasn't just suspicion, this was proof. Real, undeniable proof. I look back at the letter, my hands trembling now. I didn't want to believe my own daughter would do this, but I can't ignore what I've seen. My chest tightened painfully. There it was. Not anger, not bitterness. Just disappointment. Deep, quiet disappointment. I'm sorry you're the one who has to deal with this, but I trust you. The words hit me harder than anything else. I trust you to see things clearly. I trust you not to let them rush you, and I trust you to do what's right, even if it's hard. Tears slipped down my cheeks now, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. There was one last line, written slightly smaller than the rest, as if he had added it at the very end. You were never my second chance. You were my home. The world seemed to go quiet around me, completely still. I pressed the letter against my chest, closing my eyes as the weight of it all finally settled in. The grief, the truth, the love, and the realization that everything Lauren and Eric had tried to do, everything they were still trying to do, was built on the assumption that I didn't know, that I wouldn't question, that I would sign. But now, I knew everything. Slowly, I lowered the letter and looked at the rest of the contents in the box. The USB drive, the documents, the evidence. This wasn't just protection. This was preparation. Bill hadn't just warned me. He had given me everything I needed to fight back. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel lost. I felt ready. I didn't wait until I got home. Not this time. The letter was still in my hands, its words echoing in my mind, but my eyes kept drifting back to the small USB drive resting in the metal box. Evidence. Bill hadn't just suspected. He had recorded. My pulse quickened as I carefully placed the letter back into the blue envelope, sliding it beside me on the tray. Then I reached for the USB. It was simple, unlabeled, almost forgettable, but I knew better now. I stepped out of the vault a few minutes later, my movements calm on the outside, but my thoughts racing beneath the surface. The teller offered me a sympathetic smile, but I barely registered it. I had one goal now. Get home, see everything, understand everything. The drive back felt shorter than it should have, or maybe I was just too focused to notice the time passing. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't pause. I didn't stand in silence the way I had the night before. I went straight inside, straight to Bill's office, and straight to his desk. His laptop was still there, closed, waiting. I sat down, slowly placing the USB drive in front of me. For a moment, my hands hovered above it, because this was the line, the moment where everything would become undeniable. No more guesses, no more instincts, just truth. I took a breath and plugged it in. The screen flickered to life. A folder appeared almost immediately. No password, no encryption, just a simple name, Dorothy. My throat tightened. Of course. I clicked it open. Inside were several files, audio recordings, scanned documents, a short text file labeled Start Here. I clicked that first. The message was brief. If you're seeing this, it means you found the envelope. Listen to the recordings first, then read the documents. Everything you need is here. My heart pounded harder. Everything you need. I moved the cursor slowly to the first audio file. My finger hesitated for just a second. Then I pressed play. At first there was only static, a faint rustling sound, then voices. Lauren's voice. Clear, sharp, unmistakable. "We don't have much time," she said. My breath caught. Eric responded, his tone low and controlled. "He's already weak. It's just a matter of getting him to sign." A cold wave spread through my chest. This wasn't interpretation. This wasn't suspicion. This was real, recorded. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart hammering. "What if he doesn't?" Lauren asked. There was a pause. Then Eric spoke again. "Then we go through her." My fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. "Her, me, he won't let her say no," Lauren said quietly. He trusts her too much. Eric let out a small, humorless laugh. Then we make it seem like she doesn't have a choice. My stomach dropped. The room felt colder, smaller, like the walls were closing in. The recording continued. "You've seen the house," Eric went on. "The value alone makes this worth it. And that's not even countering the accounts. And the business assets," Lauren added. "He never fully let go of those." There was a brief pause. Then, "We just need control," Eric said. "Not help, not support. Control." I pressed pause. I couldn't breathe. Not properly. My chest felt tight, my hands trembling as I stared at the screen. This was what they had been planning. Not after Bill's death, before it. While he was still alive. While he was still fighting. They had been thinking about this. About what they could take. How they could take it. A sharp, bitter anger rose in my chest, cutting through the grief like something clean and undeniable. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was furious, but I wasn't done. I forced myself to press play again. The next part of the recording was quieter, more cautious. "We'll bring the documents again next week," Eric said. "He's weaker in the mornings, easier to push." Lauren didn't respond immediately. Then, "And if Dorothy's there?" Eric's answer came without hesitation. "Then we keep it simple. Medical authorizations first, then financial access. She won't question it if we move fast. Move fast. Don't let her think. Don't let her see." My grip tightened. Every word matched what they had tried to do at the hospital, at my house. Every word. This wasn't just a plan, it was a script. And I had almost followed it. I closed the audio file slowly. My hands were steady now, not because I wasn't shaken, but because something inside me had shifted, settled. This wasn't confusion anymore. This wasn't uncertainty. This was clarity. Cold, precise. I clicked on the next file. More recordings, different days, different conversations. All the same pattern. Pressure, strategy, assumption. They talked about me like I wasn't even a person, like I was an obstacle, a step in the process. "And once she signs, it's done," Eric said in one of the later recordings. "She won't even realize what she gave up until it's too late." Lauren didn't argue, didn't hesitate. She just said good. I stopped the playback again. Silence filled the room. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of everything I had just heard. Everything I could no longer ignore. I leaned back slowly in the chair, staring at the screen. At the folder. At the evidence Bill had left behind. This wasn't just protection. This was exposure. Proof. The kind that didn't rely on opinions or assumptions. The kind that ended arguments before they even began. I reached for the blue envelope again, pulling the letter out and reading the last lines one more time. "I trust you to see things clearly." "I do," I whispered. For the first time, I truly did. I looked back at the remaining files, the scanned documents, the copies of what Lauren and Eric had tried to get Bill to sign, the versions that had already been prepared, already structured, already waiting. They hadn't been improvising. They had been planning, carefully, patiently. But now, so had Bill. And now, so was I. I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection faintly visible in the darkened screen. I looked different. Not weaker, not lost. Something else. Something steadier, stronger. They thought I didn't know. They thought I would break. They thought I would sign. A slow breath filled my lungs, then left. "They're wrong," I said quietly. Because now I wasn't just defending myself. I was preparing. And the next time Lauren and Eric walked through that door, everything would be different. I didn't confront them right away. That was the first decision I made after listening to every file, reading every document, and sitting alone in Bill's office, long enough for the anger to settle into something quieter and far more dangerous. Clarity. If I had reacted the way I wanted to, if I had called Lauren that moment, if I had shouted, accused, thrown everything in her face, I would have lost the advantage. And for the first time in this entire situation, I had one. So instead, I waited. And I planned. The next morning, I called attorney Daniel Brooks. Bill had mentioned him before, briefly, casually, but now I understood why. He wasn't just any lawyer. He was someone Bill trusted enough to quietly handle changes to his will, without anyone else knowing. Mrs. Thompson, Daniel said when he answered, his voice calm but attentive. I was expecting your call. That stopped me. You were, I asked. Yes. He replied. Your husband contacted me shortly before he was admitted to the hospital. He said if anything happened, you might need assistance. My chest tightened. Of course he had. Even in the middle of everything, he had been thinking ahead. I've found what he left, I said. There was a pause. Then you understand the situation, Daniel replied carefully. I do now. Good, he said, because if what you're implying is accurate, you're going to need to proceed very carefully. I already know that, I said, and I need your help. We spoke for nearly an hour. I told him everything about the note, the envelope, the recordings, the documents Lauren and Eric had tried to get me to sign. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then, you have strong evidence, Daniel said. Strong. Not possible, not suspicious, strong. They can't deny this, I asked. They can try, he said, but it won't hold, not with recordings like that. A slow, steady calm settled over me. Then I want them to try, I said. There was a shift in his tone. You're thinking about confronting them. Yes, I said. How? I took a breath. On my terms. Another pause. Explain. I stood in the middle of the living room, my eyes drifting toward the dining table where they had laid out their documents just a day ago. They expect me to give in, I said. They think I'm overwhelmed, that I'll sign if they push hard enough. Daniel didn't interrupt. So I'm going to let them think that I continued. Silence. Then I see, he said slowly. I'm going to invite them back, I said. Let them bring their papers. Let them believe they're about to get exactly what they want. And then he asked. My voice didn't shake this time. Then I show them everything. Another pause. Longer this time. That could work, Daniel said finally, but it has to be controlled. You don't want this turning into a he said, she said situation. It won't, I replied. You'll be there. That caught his attention. You want me present, yes. As your attorney, he asked. As the person who makes it clear this is over, I said. There was a faint sound on the other end, papers shifting perhaps, and the nurse, he added. I hadn't expected that. You think she should be there too? If she's willing, he said. Her testimony could reinforce that your husband was lucid, that he understood what was happening. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I'll call her, good, Daniel said. Then we set this up carefully. By the time we ended the call, everything was in motion. Not rushed, not reactive, planned, deliberate. For the first time since Bill's death, I didn't feel like I was trying to catch up to something. I felt like I was finally ahead of it. That afternoon, I called Lauren. She answered on the second ring. Dorothy. She said, her tone measured. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Of course she was. I've been thinking, I said. There was a brief pause, and she prompted. I think you're right. I continued, letting just enough hesitation slip into my voice. Another pause. Longer this time. You do, she asked carefully. I can't handle all of this on my own, I said. It's too much. The words felt strange, not because they weren't true, but because I was choosing when to use them. I could almost hear the shift on her end, the subtle release of tension, the quiet satisfaction. We understand that she said, her tone softening. That's why we've been trying to help. Help. I nearly smiled. I know, I said instead, and I think it would be easier if we just got everything sorted. Exactly, she replied quickly. That's all we've been saying. I let a small silence settle between us. Then can you come by tomorrow, I asked. We can go through everything properly. There it was, the moment she had been waiting for. Yes, she said immediately. Of course. That's perfect. I just don't want any confusion, I added quietly. I want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. You are, she said. The certainty in her voice made my chest tighten, but not with doubt, with resolve. We'll bring the documents, she continued. Everything you need. I'm sure you will, I said. We ended the call shortly after that. I stood there for a moment, the phone still in my hand, then I exhaled slowly. They're coming, I whispered, and this time I was ready. The next few hours passed in a blur of quiet preparation. I printed copies of the most important documents from the USB. I organized the recordings, making sure they were easy to access. I placed the blue envelope carefully on the table, visible but closed. A presence, a reminder. Daniel confirmed he would arrive early. Emily agreed to come as well, though she sounded hesitant. "I don't usually get involved in things like this," she admitted. "I know," I said gently, "but this matters." There was a pause. "Then I'll be there," she said. By evening, everything was set. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty this time. It felt focused, like everything inside it was waiting, including me. I stood in the living room looking around slowly. This house, Bill's house, our house. Lauren had seen it as something to take, something to control, something to convert into numbers and transactions. But to me, it was something else entirely. And tomorrow, she would finally understand that. I walked to the dining table one last time, adjusting the placement of the papers, making sure everything was exactly where it needed to be. Then I sat down, alone, waiting. Not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with something far stronger. Because this time, I wasn't the one being tested. They were. They arrived exactly on time. Of course they did. Lauren had always been precise when something mattered to her, and today clearly did. I was already seated at the dining table when I heard the knock. 3 measured taps, calm, confident, certain. I didn't rush to answer. I let it hang for just a second longer than necessary. Then I stood and walked to the door. When I opened it, Lauren gave me a soft, reassuring smile, the kind she had perfected over the years. Eric stood just behind her, the leather folder in his hand once again. "Dorothy," she said warmly, "how are you holding up?" "Come in," I replied. No answer, no smile, just an invitation. They stepped inside. Lauren's eyes moved quickly around the room, scanning, assessing, just like the day before. Eric followed, his posture relaxed, but alert, as if he were already anticipating the outcome. "We won't take much of your time," he said, setting the folder on the table like it belonged there. "I'm sure you won't," I replied quietly. They didn't notice the difference in my tone, or if they did, they didn't understand it. Not yet. We all sat down, Lauren across from me. Eric slightly to her right, already opening the folder, laying out the documents with practiced efficiency. "This is everything we discussed," he said. "We've simplified it as much as possible." "Good," I said. Lauren blinked slightly. "Good," she repeated. I nodded. "I've been thinking," I said slowly, "about what you said yesterday." There was a flicker of something in her eyes, interest, anticipation, and she asked. "You're right," I continued. "I can't handle all of this alone." The shift was immediate, subtle, but unmistakable. Lauren leaned forward just slightly. Eric's shoulders relaxed. The tension they had carried in yesterday was gone, replaced with something else. Expectation, relief, control. "We understand," Lauren said gently. "That's why we're here." "I know," I replied. I reached for one of the documents, picking it up and looking at it as if I were seeing it for the first time. "Just tell me where to sign," I said. Eric smiled. Not broadly, not openly, but enough. "Of course," he said, sliding the paper closer to me and placing a pen beside it. Lauren watched me closely now, her eyes fixed on my hands, waiting. I let the moment stretch. Just slightly. "Then I do have one question," I said. Eric's hand paused. "Of course," he said. "What is it?" I looked up, directly at Lauren. "If I sign this..." I began tapping the document lightly. "What exactly am I giving you?" There it was, the question. Simple, clear. Lauren didn't hesitate. "It's just temporary authorization," she said smoothly, "so we can manage things efficiently." "Temporary," I repeated. "Yes." Eric added. "Nothing permanent, just access. Access to what I asked. The accounts," he said, "the property. Anything that needs immediate attention. And after that, I pressed. "Once everything is stabilized, we can reassess," Lauren said. "Reassess." I nodded slowly, as if considering it, as if weighing it. Then I set the paper down. "I see," I said. Lauren's eyes narrowed just slightly. Something in my tone had shifted. She felt it. but she didn't understand it yet. "Is there a problem?" she asked. I leaned back in my chair, calm, steady. "No," I said, "not anymore." The room went still. Eric frowned slightly. I said I don't have a problem anymore, I repeated. I reached into the folder beside me, not theirs, mine, and pulled out the blue envelope. I placed it gently on the table between us. Lauren's eyes dropped to it immediately. Confusion flickered across her face. "What is that?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, really looked at her, at the woman who had stood in this house as a daughter and seen it as something to take. "My husband left this for me," I said finally. Eric's posture changed instantly. Tension, alertness. "What do you mean?" he asked. I said, my voice calm but firm. He knew exactly what you were trying to do." Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Lauren didn't speak, didn't move. But I saw it. The shift, the calculation, the moment everything began to unravel. "That's not true," she said quickly. I didn't react. I simply reached for my laptop, opened it, turned it toward them, and pressed play. At first there was only static, then Lauren's voice. Clear, unmistakable. "We don't have much time." Eric froze. Lauren's face went pale. I watched them both carefully as the recording continued. Every word, every plan, every assumption they had made filled the room, loud, unavoidable. Eric's expression hardened first, then shifted into something else. Damage control. "That's taken out of context," he said quickly. I didn't respond, I let it play. "Then we go through her." Lauren's breath caught. I saw it. The exact moment she realized there was no explaining this away, no twisting it, no escaping it. "Turn that off," she snapped suddenly. I didn't. I let it play until the end. Then I closed the laptop slowly. Silence flooded the room. Thick, suffocating. "You were going to take everything I said quietly." Lauren shook her head, her composure cracking. No, that's not. "You were going to rush me," I continued. "Confuse me, get me to sign before I understood what I was giving away." Eric stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous," he said. "You're misinterpreting 'sit down,'" another voice said. Calm, firm, unfamiliar to them. Daniel Brooks stepped into the room. Lauren turned sharply. "Who is this?" she demanded. "My attorney," I said. Her eyes widened, just slightly, but enough, and he's already reviewed everything I added. Emily stepped in behind him. Quiet, steady. Lauren's gaze snapped to her. Recognition flickered. "You," she said. Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Daniel stepped forward. "The recordings are clear," he said, "as are the documents your father refused to sign." Lauren's breathing quickened. This is manipulation," she said. "You're twisting things." "No," I said. Finally, I stood. Facing her fully now. "This is the truth." The word hung between us, heavy, final. "You didn't just lose your chance to take anything from me," I continued. My voice didn't shake, not once. "You lost something much more important." Lauren stared at me, waiting, desperate. What she whispered, I met her eyes. "You lost my trust." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was absolute, because there was nothing left to say. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire room had been frozen in place by something larger than any of us. The weight of what had just been exposed, the collapse of something carefully constructed over months, maybe longer. Lauren was the first to break. "This is insane," she said, her voice rising, no longer controlled, no longer calculated. "You can't just sit there and pretend this proves anything." Her eyes darted between me, Daniel, and Emily, searching for something, an opening, a weakness, a crack she could exploit. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. "You heard the recordings," I said quietly. "That doesn't mean what you think it means," she snapped. "You don't know the context. You don't know what we were dealing with, what he was dealing with." "Then explain it," Daniel said calmly. His tone wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be. It carried something far more powerful. Authority. Lauren turned to him, her expression tightening. "You're not even part of this family," she said sharply. "I'm representing Mrs. Thompson," he replied. "That makes me very much part of this." Eric stepped forward again, his earlier composure returning in fragments. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "We came here to help, not to be accused of something we didn't do." You didn't do, I repeated, my voice steady. I reached for the laptop again, opening the folder without hesitation. There's more, I said. I clicked another file, another recording. Lauren's voice again, this time quieter, more deliberate. And once she signs, it's done. She won't even realize what she gave up until it's too late. I stopped the audio there. Didn't need to play the rest. The damage was already done. Eric's jaw tightened. Lauren didn't speak. She couldn't, because there was no space left for denial. Only reaction. This doesn't prove anything illegal, Eric said, finally, his voice sharper now, more defensive. At most, it's a conversation. Hypothetical, you can't build a case on that. Daniel didn't raise his voice. Didn't step closer, he didn't have to. You're mistaken, he said calmly. What we have here is evidence of intent. Coupled with the documents you prepared and attempted to execute, it establishes a clear pattern. Eric scoffed, but it sounded forced. A pattern of what he challenged. Daniel held his gaze. Attempted financial exploitation, he said. The words landed like a physical blow. Lauren's head snapped toward him. That's ridiculous, she said quickly. You're twisting, I'm describing. Daniel interrupted gently. Emily stepped forward slightly, then her presence quiet but undeniable. I spoke to your father, she said, her voice steady. He was lucid, clear. He told me exactly what you were asking him to sign and that he refused. Lauren stared at her. You're just a nurse, she said, her voice trembling now. Not with control, but with something else. Fear. Emily didn't react. I'm a witness, she replied. Silence again. But this time it felt different, heavier, because the truth was no longer something that could be argued. It was something that had been laid out, piece by piece, until there was nowhere left to hide. Eric looked at Lauren, something unspoken passing between them. Then suddenly, this was your idea, he said. The shift was abrupt, violent. Lauren turned to him, stunned. What she said. You pushed this, Eric continued, his voice rising. You said he wouldn't last long. You said we needed to act fast. Lauren's face drained of color. You agreed, she shot back. You drafted the documents. Because you said he wanted it simplified, Eric snapped. You said Dorothy wouldn't question it. Their voices overlapped now, sharp, accusing, desperate. I watched them in silence. Because this was the truth they had hidden from everyone else. Finally exposed, not just to me, but to each other. You told me she wouldn't fight it, Eric said. You told me it was standard, Lauren fired back. It is standard when it's legitimate, he replied. And this was supposed to be, was it? He interrupted. That stopped her, for just a second. But it was enough. Because in that second, everything fell apart. Daniel stepped forward again, his voice cutting through the chaos. I suggest you both stop speaking, he said calmly. Anything further you say can and will be used against you. Eric froze. Lauren's mouth closed mid-sentence, the reality of the situation finally catching up with them. This isn't over, Lauren said after a moment, her voice quieter now, but no longer steady. No, I agreed. It isn't. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. For the first time since all of this began, there was no calculation in her expression, no strategy, just something raw, something broken. You're really going to do this, she asked. The question wasn't angry. It wasn't even defensive. It was almost disbelieving. Yes, I said, without hesitation, without doubt. Yes. Her shoulders sagged slightly, as if something inside her had finally given way. This is my father's house, she said quietly. And this is my life, I replied. The words settled between us, not as an argument, but as a truth, one she couldn't undo, one she couldn't take back. Daniel spoke again, his tone firm but measured. We'll be submitting the relevant evidence to the appropriate authorities, he said. You'll be notified if further action is required. Eric let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. This is insane, he muttered again, but this time it sounded less like defiance and more like disbelief. Lauren didn't argue, didn't protest. She just stood there for a moment longer, then turned, slowly, and walked toward the door. Eric hesitated, glancing back once at the table at the documents at me. Then he followed her. The door closed behind them, soft, final. The silence that followed was different from before. Not heavy, not suffocating, clear, open, like something that had been holding its breath for too long had finally exhaled. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door. Then I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "It's done," I said quietly. Daniel shook his head slightly. "Not completely," he said, "but the hardest part is." I nodded because I understood what he meant. The truth had been revealed. The illusion had been broken. And whatever came next, it wouldn't be built on lies. I looked down at the table, at the blue envelope, at the documents Bill had left behind, at everything he had done to protect me even when he was running out of time. "You were right," I whispered. And for the first time since he was gone, I felt like I had honored that. The house felt different after they left. Not quieter, not emptier, just mine again. For days, maybe weeks, without me realizing it, there had been something lingering beneath the surface. A tension I couldn't name at the time. A sense that something was shifting around me. Decisions being made just out of reach. Now it was gone. Not erased, but exposed. And once something is brought into the light, it loses its power. The following weeks moved slowly, but not painfully. Not the way the first days after Bill's death had been. Grief was still there. It always would be. It came in waves, quiet moments in the kitchen, the empty chair across from me at the table, the silence at night where his breathing used to be, but it no longer came with confusion or fear, because now I understood everything that had been happening around me, and I had chosen not to let it define me. Daniel handled the legal side of things with steady precision. The evidence we had was more than enough to open an investigation. The recordings, the documents, the pattern of behavior, it all pointed clearly to intent. I didn't follow every detail. I didn't need to. What mattered was that the truth was no longer something I carried alone. Lauren reached out once. A message, short, uncertain. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding, because part of me still remembered who she had been before all of this. Not kind, not close, but still family. Still Bill's daughter. In the end, I wrote only one thing. "You crossed a line you can't come back from." She didn't reply, and I didn't expect her to. Some things once broken don't return to what they were. Not because you don't want them to, but because they shouldn't. Eric never contacted me at all. I suppose in his mind this had always been a transaction. And when the deal fell apart, so did his interest. That was the difference between them. Lauren had lost something personal. Eric had simply lost an opportunity. Months passed. The seasons shifted quietly around me. Our house remained exactly as Bill had built it. I didn't sell it. I didn't simplify anything. I kept it, because it wasn't just a structure, it was a life. Our life. And for the first time since he was gone, I could walk through it without feeling like I was holding something together that was already falling apart. Instead, I felt like I was rebuilding. Not everything, just myself. One small step at a time. I stayed in touch with Emily. What started as a simple phone call became something more unexpected but meaningful. We met for coffee once, then again, and eventually it became a quiet kind of friendship built on something neither of us had planned. "You know," she said one afternoon, stirring her drink absent-mindedly, "I almost didn't give you that note." I looked at her. Why I wasn't sure it was my place, she admitted. Hospitals. We're taught to stay out of family matters. I smiled faintly. "I'm glad you didn't." She nodded. "So am I." Daniel checked in occasionally, always professional, always steady. "You handled that better than most people would have," he told me once. I shook my head. "I didn't feel strong." "You don't have to feel strong to act strong," he replied. That stayed with me, because it was true. I hadn't felt powerful in that moment at the table. I had felt scared, angry, overwhelmed, but I had still chosen not to give in. And sometimes, that's what strength actually looks like. One afternoon, I found myself standing in the cemetery. I hadn't planned it. I had just gotten in the car driven without thinking and ended up there. Bill's name was carved simply into the stone. No grand statement, no dramatic words, just him. I stood there quietly for a long time. I did what you asked, I said finally. My voice sounded different out there, softer but clearer. I didn't let them rush me. A small breeze moved through the trees, gentle and steady. I almost did, I admitted. At the hospital, I was so tired. I wasn't thinking clearly. I paused. But you knew that. Of course he had. That's why he had planned ahead. That's why he had left the note, the envelope, the evidence. He hadn't just trusted me. He had protected me, even when he couldn't be there anymore. I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter, unfolding it carefully. I read the last line again. You were my home. A quiet smile touched my lips, even as tears filled my eyes. You were mine too, I whispered. The grief was still there. It would always be there. But it wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't overwhelming. It was something else now. Something deeper, something quieter, something that didn't need to be fixed, because it wasn't broken. It was love. And love doesn't disappear just because someone is gone. It changes. It settles. It stays. I folded the letter again and held it for a moment before placing it back in my bag. Then I took one last look at his name, not with pain, not with regret, but with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. I'm okay, I said softly, and for the first time, I truly meant it. After everything that happened, I realized something I wish more people understood sooner. Not every threat comes from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people who know your life the best. The ones who understand your routines, your weaknesses, your moments of vulnerability. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Grief is one of those moments. It clouds your thinking. It makes you trust too quickly, decide too fast, and say yes when you should take a step back. If there's one lesson I can share, it's this. Never let anyone rush you into a decision when your heart is still trying to catch up with your loss. Take your time, ask questions, and if something feels wrong, even if you can't explain why, listen to that feeling. It might be the only thing protecting you. I was lucky. I had a warning. I had time, and I had the strength even when I didn't feel like I did to stop and look closer. But not everyone gets that chance. So I want to ask you something. What would you have done in my place? Would you have signed those papers? Would you have trusted them? Or would you have stopped, even for just a moment, to question everything? If this story made you think or reminded you of something in your own life, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share your perspective. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories that remind us to protect ourselves, to trust our instincts, and to stand our ground, please like this video and subscribe, because sometimes the smallest warning can save everything.